In this podcast, two Gen Xers are taking a trip down memory lane, revisiting and reflecting on the cinema of the 1980s. We'll look at the hits and the flops, the studio blockbusters and art house indies, the critically acclaimed, and the universally reviled. The series is hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli, a writer and librarian, and features Dustin Morrow, a filmmaker, author, and professor of film. So pull on your legwarmers, crank up your boombox, and hop in the DeLorean. It's time for the Long Rewind. Welcome to the Long Rewind. I'm your host, Lisa, and with me as always is Dustin.
Hello.
And we're here to talk to you about the films of the second half of 1989. You ready for this?
We made it.
Yeah, this is the last half of the last year of the 80s. I know. I can't believe we're at the end of the decade here. So yeah, shall we get into it?
Yeah. So key films of the second half of 89, we're talking July through December here. Mm-hmm. Here's how I split them up.
Okay,
I had,
your themes.
hits and flops.
Yep.
And then I had a selection of high-profile indie films. Mm-hmm. As I said in the last episode, this was sort of the birth of the where indies really became big, really took off.
Right.
I mean, they existed obviously before this, but the 90s was a golden era for indie movies.
Definitely.
With the rise of festivals like Sundance and Telluride, and the New York Festival Tribeca and other festivals. And a section of prestige movies, sort of critically acclaimed, kind of Oscar baity movies.
Mm-hmm. I definitely noticed that.
So let's start with the hits, I suppose. Continuing on the sequelitis of the summer of '89, which was a huge sequel summer. We had Lethal Weapon 2.
That came out on my birthday.
Did it really?
Yeah, according to the calendar.
Yeah. Those movies are fine. There's such a notable difference for me between Lethal Weapon and the three sequels, which is that the first movie... what makes the first movie interesting to me, and it's there in the title, like Danny Glover says, we're going to have to register you as a lethal weapon. He's talking to Mel Gibson, and it's because Mel Gibson's character is suicidal. Mm-hmm. He's really depressed. His wife, over his wife's death. And there are scenes in that movie where he does things that could very easily end in his death, and he doesn't care.
Right.
There's a scene, in fact, in his trailer where he puts a gun in his mouth. And I get why they didn't continue that thread of his character on. I mean, his arc in the original Lethal Weapon is that he's not that guy by the end of the movie. He's kind of found a reason to live, and he's kind of been welcomed into his partner's family, and through that friendship has kind of become a different guy. And also, it'd be hard to follow a character like that through a lot of different movies. But for me, like, the Lethal Weapon has an edge that I think people sometimes forget that it has if you just remember all the sequels, which are pretty lightweight and kind of cartoony almost.
I mean, frankly, I'd forgotten that's why they were even called Lethal Weapon. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget. Yeah, for sure.
Other hits, Parenthood.
Yeah.
So the Steve Martin kind of multi-generational look at what it means to be a parent, directed by Ron Howard. Yeah. Interestingly, Steve Martin was not a parent when he made this movie. But yeah, it's, I mean, you and I are not parents, so I can't speak to its veracity, but I sense that it
struck a chord with
a lot of people because they made a sitcom out of it.
I was going to say it had some legs in that regard. Like that's a relatively recent sitcom, I think. Yeah.
It has an incredible cast.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. This is another Keanu movie. He had this and Bill and Ted this year. So, I mean, it's not a
When
Keanu
Harry
movie.
Met Sally came out this time. Maybe the best romantic comedy of the decade.
Some people would say. Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people would say it's the best of all time, but then I feel like you've got to think about stuff like The Philadelphia Story and Bringing Up Baby. And you have to look a little further back to maybe find that title to give that crown away, but
I would agree.
But it's probably the best contemporary
that
comedy.
Maybe that's the appropriate label.
It was directed by Rob Reiner, but it really announced the kind of launch of Nora Ephron as a huge voice in that genre.
And that went on to become a huge thing in the 90s, Nora Ephron and the romantic comedy, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of movies that owe a lot to When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah.
The Little Mermaid, as we mentioned in the last episode, the beginning of a new renaissance of Disney animation.
Yep.
All started with The Little Mermaid.
I definitely had a love affair with that movie when I was probably the perfect age for it. I was 11 that year, and I had the CD and, the VHS. I mean, those things I had later, I think, after it was in theaters. But yeah, that was huge for little girls.
Another animated hit from that same time was a movie called All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably kind of been forgotten now, but it was a big hit at the time.
I remember it being around. I don't think I've actually ever seen it.
It was a non-Disney animated.
Was it Don Bluth?
Movie.
Was it the Bluth
I think it was Don Bluth. He had a string. He had American Tail and Land Before Time about dinosaurs.
That was pretty big.
Yeah, there were a string of movies that kind of followed the Disney animation renaissance to some success.
Definitely. Yeah.
The god-awful Look Who's Talking was a big hit.
I mean, I don't like it, but it was for sure a thing. It was huge.
It was talking babies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe one talking baby. I don't remember.
Yeah,
I've seen it, I'm sure.
It's John Travolta and Kirstie Alley. It was John Travolta before Pulp Fiction kind of really, gave him a second
his comeback. Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of a minor hit for him at a time when he wasn't considered to be particularly good for the box office.
There are a few sequels to that, or just one? There's Look Who's Talking 2.
There's Look Who's Talking 2, which I think just adds a second baby, which is Roseanne Barr, I think is the baby. No. Bruce Willis is the baby in the first one.
Oh, is that right?
And in the second one, they add Roseanne. Yeah. And then in the third one, it's dogs.
Right.
I don't remember. Look Who's Talking Now. That's the name of it. I can't remember who voiced the dogs.
Wow.
I don't think I ever saw it, actually.
I'm sure I saw the first one. I don't remember a darn thing about it.
Yeah.
Apart from the premise, obviously. Which,
I think I haven't seen it since, but I remember at the time thinking it was really bad. Uncle Buck was from this era. It's a later period John Hughes, John Candy team up and gave us Macaulay Culkin before Home Alone.
That's right.
Yeah. He makes that gigantic pancake with the shovel. I feel like that's the first thing people remember from Uncle Buck.
That is the biggest thing I remember from it, at least from my younger days. Yeah.
If you haven't seen it in a while, I think if you watch it, what might surprise you about it is that it's a little darker than you would think it would be.
It does have darker moments. Yeah, that's true.
Uncle Buck's got a little bit of a mean streak in him. Yeah. Sea of Love was from this period, and that was a big deal because Pacino hadn't made a movie in like 5 or 6 years.
Tell us what Sea of Love is. I actually don't know this very well. I know the title.
Return.
Yeah.
It fits into that late 80s period of erotic thrillers, kind of like your Fatal Attraction, Jagged Edge, Indecent Proposal was one from the early 90s.
Sliver,
that kind of like disclosure.
Right. Got it.
He's a cop, and he and John Goodman, who plays his partner, are hunting a serial killer who is finding people through classified ads, I think. And so they plant their own, or they answer some or something to find them. And he starts a relationship with Ellen Barkin. And this was like Ellen Barkin at the height of her like sex symbol status. Like she was like The Big Easy was a big movie for her around this time. And they suspect that she might be the serial killer, but he just can't stop himself because he's so into her. Right. It was that kind of thing.
Okay.
It's a pretty good movie. It's not bad. Christmas Vacation was a big hit.
Huge.
And a perennial holiday favorite for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Steel Magnolias.
Yep.
Was a big hit, starring an amazing cast of actresses.
Quite a cast. Titans.
I think that's an adaptation of a play.
Yeah, I believe so.
Right. Yeah. And was kind of a first big Hollywood movie for Julia Roberts.
Oh.
Because she had done Mystic Pizza before, which was an indie movie. Yeah. And then she did this shortly before doing Pretty Woman, which I think was 90. I think that was the very next year.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then The Abyss was the other one that I noted as a kind of I don't think it was as big a hit as you might think based on how much it cost, but it's a well-regarded movie, and people that love it really love it.
Well, and it ties back. We talked last time about there were a couple of other movies this year that were bottom of the ocean, aliens,
alien
mining,
ripoffs,
and it's one of those. It's a James Cameron movie, is it?
Yeah,
not?
it's the prestigious one of those. The other ones were kind of low budget monster movies, but The Abyss has some prestige attached to it because of James Cameron and the cast. It's a good movie.
Yeah, it has its pleasures, I think.
Prestige movies. The War of the Roses.
Yeah.
Starring our friend Kathleen.
Yep.
A great black comedy directed by Danny DeVito, who made quite a few black comedies in this era.
Did he make Throw Mama from the Train? I know he's in it, but...
Yeah, that was his first movie that he directed.
Okay.
And then he went on to do a few.
Oh. I don't think I knew that.
Smoochie.
Oh, okay.
There were some, they weren't that big of hits. There's one, I can't remember the name of it, but he's like, it's about, I think it's like Broderick and Drew Barrymore, and they want to kill their neighbor who has a rent-controlled apartment.
Oh. Yeah, I can't think of the name of this one, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It's not The Super. That's a Joe Pesci movie.
Yeah.
But it's something like that.
I know what you mean.
Duplex. Is it called Duplex?
Yeah, I was thinking Brownstone, but I think Duplex is correct. Duplex. Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, he's quite a good maker of black comedies, and that movie famously has an incredibly grim, acidic ending that the studio did not want to keep, and Douglas and Turner and DeVito all banded together and put their foot down and said, absolutely, you're not changing it. We want to kill these two characters.
Yeah. I haven't seen that movie in a long, long time.
Yeah, that whole last part of the third act where they're suspended up on that chandelier together is just great.
Yeah, I know this. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of rewindable moments for that one because it's.
Oh my God, it's such a funny movie. The things they do to each other are just mind-boggling.
I should see it again. It's probably been decades since I've seen it.
Yeah,
so
it was a lot of. I'm sure it was. We know Kathleen, of course, and she said that it was still a lot of fun for her and Douglas to play with their. Because they had this image from the Romancing the Stone movies,
right?
As this like great couple, and here they are, like just trying to kill each other for 2 hours.
yeah, for sure.
Driving Miss Daisy, which I think won Best Picture that year and Best Actress for Jessica Tandy. It's a movie that is oft criticized, especially since it came out the same year as Do the Right Thing, and it was a bigger hit, and it was a bigger hit at the Oscars. And Spike Lee was openly critical of it. So, yeah, I think it's a good movie. I like it.
You saw the director or something at Cannes, right?
I did, yeah. I went to I don't know if it was a 25th anniversary or whatever year at the Cannes Film Festival. And the director, Bruce Beresford, who's this very kind of soft-spoken Australian guy, was there. He actually wasn't nominated for Best Director, even though the movie won Best Picture. It's one of the only times that's happened. It's unusual. Glory was kind of a success at that time about the regiment of African-American soldiers during the Civil War. It was a big movie for Denzel, kind of really launching his career. 2
Denzel picks this year, too, the Mighty Quinn and Glory.
Yeah. He won Supporting Actor for Glory, I think.
Well, we'll find out later, but you might be
Born
right.
on the 4th of July, another war movie about Ron Kovic's anti-Vietnam
movie.
Yeah. Demonstrating, Tom Cruise plays Kovic. It's an Oliver Stone movie, and it's very heavy and very Oliver Stoney.
I have never seen it, and those are probably some reasons why I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan, heavy, although Tom Cruise is really good in it.
Yeah, I've heard that.
The Fabulous Baker Boys.
Oh, yeah.
This time is romantic comedy with Jeff Bridges and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Isn't it both Bridges?
Bo Bridges is in it. Yeah. They're like a piano bar.
Right.
And they hire her as a singer.
Yeah, I've never seen that movie either, but I remember it being around.
Yeah, it's good. She sings in it.
Yeah, I thought that she did.
Yeah, which, if you've seen Grease 2.
Yep. She sings in that too.
She's quite the balladeer. And then Casualties of War, which is an anti-war movie from Brian De Palma, which is even more grueling than Born on the 4th of July, about a true event that happened of a sexual assault that occurred of a Vietnamese woman by American soldiers and the fallout from that. And it was the press it got at the time was really more about how it was a big dramatic turn for Michael J. Fox, who was, of course, known for comedy at the time. And he's very good in it. Sean Penn is the other soldier. Michael J. Fox is the good guy. Sean Penn's the villain. It's quite a good movie, and it's really hard to watch.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah. Indie movies. Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which I mentioned in the last episode of our podcast, which is Steven Soderbergh's big breakthrough movie. And it was also the movie that kind of put the Sundance Film Festival on the map. It's
a movie I've never seen.
Yeah, it's
another one.
It's very cold. Drugstore Cowboy, which is Gus Van Sant's big breakthrough movie, shot in Portland, Oregon, where we are recording this podcast.
That's right.
With Matt Dillon and Kelly Lynch as drug addicts drifting around Portland.
I haven't seen that movie either. I know
good.
It's a good deal.
Movie.
Yeah.
Henry V.
Yeah.
Kenneth Branagh's breakthrough movie.
Wonderful.
His adaptation of the Shakespeare play.
That I have seen.
He adapts it and stars in it and directs it and produces it. And he was amazing, very young. Yeah. He was in his 20s.
I was going to say, he must have been pretty young at the time. Yeah.
My Left Foot, the Irish movie about the artist and writer Christy Brown.
I really should see that too. That's another one wonderful. I just haven't seen. Yeah. I've heard it's wonderful. I
think Daniel Day-Lewis won Best Actor that year.
We'll find out, but yeah you might be right.
He's incredible in it. It's Brenda Fricker's incredible in it. It's very charming and uplifting. Mystery Chain, which is Jim Jarmusch movie.
I like the title. I don't know anything about this movie.
Yeah, I can't remember a lot about it either because I haven't seen it in so long.
I've never seen it, so yeah.
I think it is about a couple of tourists from Japan who are obsessed with Elvis Presley, who come to Memphis, Tennessee, to drink in the Elvis culture and kind of have misadventures and stuff.
Sounds intriguing.
That's my memory of it. Don't quote me on it.
Sounds like kind of a good premise.
And finally, Roger and Me, which was the big breakthrough movie for Michael Moore, the documentarian about Flint, Michigan, and GM, General Motors, and how they moved all their jobs to Mexico and destroyed the town of Flint, Michigan. It's still my favorite Michael Moore movie. It's really funny and interesting because it was his first movie, and he kind of arrived fully formed as a filmmaker.
Wow.
It's a very confident, very Michael Moore-ish movie. It has all the kind of comedy and subversiveness and, kind of rejiggering of the form of the documentary. It's all right there, and it's right in his first movie. Wow. And he really hasn't changed as a filmmaker. All his movies that he made after that for, 30 odd years are exactly like Roger and Me. Have you seen Roger and Me?
I have. I was just going to say I haven't seen it, and I was going to ask you if what you're saying is that he pretty much had the format then that he has now, which is very distinctive, I think, and has certain beats.
Yeah, he's in his movie, which was a thing that wasn't really being done a lot. He kind of hosts the movie, right?
Yeah.
It's very autobiographical. It uses pop music in interesting ways and comedy.
Yeah, I really should see it.
Yeah, it's very, very good.
I bet it's good. I used to watch his show. Didn't he he had a show?
The Awful Truth? TV Nation.
TV Nation. Yeah, I know I used to watch that.
He had one called The Awful Truth.
I think it was TV Nation that I used to.
TV Nation was like Fox, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. It was, I don't know if that was the 90s or when that was, but...
it was the 90s. It was like early 90s.
Yeah.
And then a few flops. Turner and Hooch. The, Tom Hanks and a dog as cops.
K9 was also this year, let's not forget. So
it was
a thing
with James Belushi and a dog.
Yeah,
dog cops were a thing in '89
for a hot minute in '89.
Always,
yep,
which is Steven Spielberg's remake of, I think it's a movie called A Guy Named Joe.
Oh, okay.
It's Holly Hunter and Richard Dreyfuss. Richard Dreyfuss dies and then comes back as a ghost to help her into a new relationship.
And I believe
it's
Audrey
pretty treacly and pretty bad.
Isn't Audrey Hepburn in this movie too for a little bit?
Oh God, she is. Yeah. She's like an angel.
I don't know if it's like her last film, but she's, it's definitely later in her life.
It's quite bad. She-Devil, which is a black comedy with, of all people, Meryl Streep and Roseanne Barr.
Roseanne Barr.
Roseanne Barr was huge at this time.
She was,
Look Who's Talking.
For good reason.
You know, the sequel to that, and her show was huge.
Yeah, her show was huge.
Yeah, she was really big at the time, and She-Devil was an attempt to cash in on her popularity, but it's quite a bad movie.
What's funny is I saw this go by, and I've never seen it. I saw it go by in the calendar as I was looking, and the only thing I remembered about it was that Roseanne was in it. I didn't remember Meryl Streep was in it at all.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Yeah. Well, maybe that's for the best. I don't know.
Harlem Nights, which was the big vanity project for Eddie Murphy. He wrote and directed, produced it, and stars in it. It's him and Richard Pryor, who was his hero.
Oh, yeah.
And it's set in the 1920s. It's like a Prohibition-era comedy, and it's just very indulgent and long and slow and not very good, although it has one hilarious scene at the beginning where Eddie and Della Reese get in a fist fight out in an alley behind the nightclub.
That's too bad. It always sounded really intriguing to me because that time period's really interesting and great people in it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah,
it's too bad.
It's unfortunate. And then finally, License to Kill, which was the second James Bond movie for Timothy Dalton.
Yeah.
So if we'll do a James Bond episode, I'm sure. James Bond in the 80s. So there's no need to go into it too deeply here, but Timothy Dalton never really got much of a fair shake, and License to Kill is essentially a Miami Vice episode. It's like a 2-hour episode of Miami Vice. It's like it's like James Bond going after like drug dealers in the Caribbean and South America. And it's just not very Bondish. So, and it was the last Bond for many years until they brought it back with GoldenEye and Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah.
Did you have any other key films that I miss?
Let me take a look here. I think you really mentioned most of them. Oh, I guess, did you mention Back to the Future? Obviously, that's part of sequelitis that year, but you'd mentioned Michael J. Fox, and it's just interesting that he had both Back to the Future Part 2 this year and that movie. The thing I wanted to say about Back to the Future is I don't remember what year in the Back to the Future Part 2, they go into the future, right? I believe.
Yes. What
year is it? I'm just curious,
I don't remember, but it's really frantic, that movie, and it's all over the place. They go into the future, but then they also go back to the original movie, and there's all these scenes where he's watching the events of the original movie happening. He goes back to the dance.
I didn't remember
this.
He
sees himself at the dance.
I haven't seen this movie in a long time.
It's a divisive movie, right? There are people that really love Back to the Future too. There are people that like it better than the first one, which blows my mind.
Wow.
But some people are really into it. And then a lot of people really hate it.
Wow. I
don't hate it, but I think it's frantic and overworked and overwritten and just kind of
yeah.
It's a little bit of a, it's too much of what it is. And it sacrifices the charm of the first one, I think.
I remember two things, and one is, of course, the hoverboard. Everybody remembers that, and that sort of vaguely came true later on with those little wheel sort of hoverboards that people were using.
Do you remember when I was a kid? I remember after that movie, there were all these rumors at my school, or not all these. One rumor at my school that
it was a small school.
It was real,
and
that the government thought that kids would get hurt. And so they stopped Mattel or whoever it was that invented
Mattel was one in the movie
from marketing it and making it. But all of us boys were really pissed that
the government was holding this back from you.
Was holding us back from getting actual hoverboards.
Well, that ended a couple of years ago, or a few years ago now. No, I didn't. That rumor didn't make it.
But the hoverboards that showed up a few years ago
they weren't really
stupid.
Hoverboards.
They're on
they
wheels.
were stupid.
They're not like the ones in.
No, of course not. And they would catch fire.
I grew up on a lake. I had visions like Marty McFly where he goes over the water just hoverboarding all over the place, including over the lake.
Well, I'm sorry for your disappointment. That would have been pretty cool. The other thing
Thank you for recognizing my
your pain.
My pain and my loss.
I'm so sorry. The other thing I remember from that movie that I sort of came true, right? Isn't there like a Jaws 3D in that movie, which does come true?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It's goofy stuff.
Those are the things I remember, sadly. I mean, I think I've only seen it once or twice and a very long time ago. I remember very little about it.
I have a handful of unsung gems.
Yeah,
How about
let's
yourself?
talk about it. I've got a handful too.
What do you got?
Well, honestly, you hit a lot of them, and some of them I hadn't seen, but My Left Foot, Roger and Me. I guess those were bigger than, they weren't really hidden, but I was 11 at the time, so I didn't hear about them at the time. Black Rain is probably the biggest one I have on here that we haven't really talked about, which is a movie I think you and I both like. You introduced me to this movie. Yeah, it's a great movie.
Ridley Scott and Michael Douglas. It's about a cop who has to go to Japan because he's chasing the Yakuza.
Yep.
And it's just a very Ridley Scott movie. It's very visual.
It's got a lot of shadowed fans.
It's like a
silhouettes.
very noir, film noir.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. And Douglas is hamming it up big time as the kind of the rogue cop, the loose cannon with his long locks. And
he does have long locks in this movie. That's true. Yeah. I actually really like this movie. I like the Japanese actor that he plays opposite. I can't remember his name.
I want to say Nakamura, but I'm not sure.
Okay, I don't know his name, but he's wonderful as well. And yeah, the vibe, the look, it's very noir.
Watanabe, maybe.
I thought it might be Watanabe. I don't want to
he's
speak,
great. He's really great.
He's really wonderful.
It's a great buddy movie.
It is a great buddy movie. And again, one of those, I mean, there, like we mentioned last time, I think a lot of this was a theme in the 80s because it was happening, the sort of fascination with Japanese culture, the crossover between Japanese business and the West and United States. So that's there a little bit.
Yeah.
For sure.
Did you have other ones?
Well, again, you mentioned a lot of them. Henry V, again, maybe not hidden, but I had it there. So you mentioned kind of a lot of them. But what do you have?
Yeah, I have some. UHF.
Oh, yeah,
has
UHF.
gone on to become a cult movie.
Love
which
UHF.
is the Weird Al Yankovic's movie.
Yeah. Love UHF.
I just find it very charming and very funny, and I find that the gags really work, and I've quoted it. My family and my sister and I, we've quoted this movie for 30 years, Spatula City. There's just so many. Conan the Librarian, Gandhi too. He's not taking any shit this time.
Yeah.
The Rambo spoof is hilarious. It just, so much of it works. It's just really, really funny. And I loved it as a kid and I love it as an adult. I find I've grown up with Weird Al's humor, and I had Weird Al albums and I love that he has become something of I love that his success is sustained, because it could have been so easy for Weird Al to be like this kind of novelty figure from the 80s. And instead he's like maintained his career and he's become one of the great kind of comic voices, really.
I love that too.
Like the last 40 years.
I love that too. And I'm really glad that he did, because you're right. I mean, there's a degree to which he is like the 80s to me, but that said, he really has persevered and kept himself fresh, and we all love him today. So, and
it reminds me how much my mom loves me, because we went to this movie and at the mall, and the power went out. It was during a storm, and we sat there for a while, and then the ushers came in and said, the power is not coming back on, so we're going to give you all passes to see this movie again. And then, God bless her, my mom brought me back the next weekend, and we watched all of UHF again. And I know that would not have been her choice.
And yet she loved Spatula City, did she not?
My mom is a big fan of Spatula
funny.
City. It's true. I don't know that she particularly cared for UHF on the whole, but at
least she liked Spatula City.
She found Spatula City funny, because she has quoted that for sure.
Yes, yeah. I actually had this is going back to a movie we already talked about, but I had a going to the movies memory from this year too of Parenthood. A little girlfriend and I was 10 or 11 this year, depending on what time of year we're talking about. And I think that was at least a PG-13 movie. And this used to be a thing, maybe still is, at least in my town. You could get denied seeing a movie if you weren't the right age for it. I sort of forget about that now because, of course, we are of age to see every movie now. But my little friend and I, who were probably both about 11, went to see Parenthood. And I think as we were buying the tickets, we were really nervous about like getting denied going into this movie. But we weren't. We went in to see it, and we were way too... I think about it now, I feel like I was probably, frankly, way too young to see it. But I do have a really strong memory of one scene. I don't remember a lot about it now. But
the vibrator scene.
No, that's actually not that one. Mary Steenburgen, she gets pregnant, but by accident, right? I think in that movie.
Oh, right. She's performs oral sex on Steve Martin and crashes the car.
Also not what I remember.
Yeah,
but
it's actually a pretty racy movie.
Yeah, I really shouldn't probably have been seeing it at 11. But the thing I remember is there's a moment where she realizes she's pregnant and she like holds up what I didn't know at the time was a diaphragm and like pours water through it and there's a hole in it and you see the water dripping through it. And I was like, so what's going on? Like I sort of got it, but sort of didn't. I didn't know what a diaphragm was. I have this really strong memory of seeing that and being like a little confused and fascinated by that. I don't remember all the things you're talking about, but I can't believe I went to see this when I was 11.
Yeah.
Quite a moment.
There's all kinds of stuff. And Diane Wiest finds photos or she picks up the wrong photos at the photomat. She gets her daughter's photos, Martha Plimpton, and their photos of Martha and Keanu Reeves having sex.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, there's all kinds of racy
I can't
stuff
believe it.
in
I don't
Parenthood.
know. I
probably should have been rated R, come to think of it.
I mean, maybe, but I'm not remembering what it was rated. Sure, we didn't, I barely look 17 now in some ways. I've always been a really young-looking person.
How did you guys get in?
I don't know how we got in. My friend who I was with, I think, was a little bit of a racier, more daring person. I probably wouldn't have dared to do this without her at the time. So it's just a going to the movies memory that I have.
I got to say, you're a little square when one of your big...
I know. I know.
The man, I did something naughty stories is that I snuck into a PG-13 Ron Howard family comedy.
Well, to know me is to know that that's about as rebellious as I've ever gotten. So that's 100% true of me.
People are like telling stories of like sneaking off to Tijuana. And doing drugs. And Lisa's like, well, I got one for you.
I got in to see Parenthood when I was 11. And my mom bought me a ticket to see Pulp Fiction when I was 16.
Well,
so
how about that?
These are my big moments.
All right, I have a few unsung gems. These are true unsung gems. Like people do not. I don't think people know these movies at all.
I probably don't.
I'd be shocked if anybody's heard of these even.
Okay.
One's called Gross Anatomy. Mm-hmm. It's a Matthew Modine, Daphne Zuniga, Christine Lottie comedy about medical school.
Makes sense.
And it's actually pretty good. It's a Disney. It was like a Touchstone movie.
Okay.
And it deserved better than it got because it's actually pretty well written. A movie called The Package.
Okay.
Which is not a porn.
A lot of movies.
It's actually a spy thriller, a Cold War spy thriller with Gene Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones.
We've seen this. I've seen this. This is really good.
Yeah. It's a good. If you like Gene Hackman, if you like kind of Jean Le Carre type,
which I do,
old school spy movies. It's not like James Bond. It's like more realistic.
Yeah, it's like low key kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of low key, but it's good.
Very Cold War. Yeah, no, I really like that movie. It's good.
And then a movie called An Innocent Man. It was originally titled Hard Rain, but they changed the name to An Innocent Man. It also came from Touchstone from Disney, but it's a prison thriller where Tom Selleck is framed for something he didn't do by a couple of corrupt cops who are trying to cover their tracks. And full on has to do 3 years in prison in the movie and try to survive. And it's... for a Disney movie, it's really gritty.
I think I've seen this with you because isn't there a whole section where he's gotten out and bad things are happening to him? Yeah,
he gets out eventually after 3 years, and the two cops are
still after him.
And he tries to get justice for himself.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's a really great action thriller. Set against the backdrop of a maximum security prison. Tom Selleck's really good in it. Mm-hmm. I saw this movie and it had started, and we were like 15 minutes into the movie when an entire football team walked in. It was a visiting football team that was there to play the local college against the local college. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember where they were from, but I was like, what the hell? it was like 45 gigantic guys came in. And I was like, oh, man, this sucks because they're going to be loud and obnoxious and what have you. But they sat there wrapped. And then the movie actually is a very feel-good movie because, spoiler, Tom Selleck gets justice.
It is a Disney movie.
You really, like, it has really bad, hissable villains. And when they get their comeuppance, this whole football team was like screaming and hooting and hollering. And it ended up being kind of a great movie-going experience. Yeah.
My only question is, were they so big that they sat in front of you and it was hard to see? Or were they, do you remember?
No, I don't remember having trouble seeing the screen, but that is a valid question.
Yeah.
What about B movies? Do you have any B movies you want to mention?
I mean, I don't think I recognized or knew a lot of the B movies from this year. There's one that I saw, and I don't think I've actually seen it, but it was around so much that I remember it, Young Einstein. With Yahoo Serious, I believe. You can speak to this movie a little better than I can, but I know a little about it.
Yeah, I like Young Einstein. I remember Siskel and Ebert's review was hilarious because it was just them for like 5 minutes going, I don't get this.
It's an Australian movie, we should say. Fair. We should explain what this is.
It's very quirky and very Australian.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I got it either or even still get it. But but it uses music. It's just a very zany movie. It was by a guy named Yahoo Serious. He wrote and directed and produced and edited and starred in it. It was like almost a one-man movie, which is kind of amazing. And he plays Albert Einstein, who is a Tasmanian farmer and beer maker. And goes to Sydney and has all these adventures and invents rock and roll and invents beer and invents all this other stuff that, of course, Einstein had nothing to do with. But
he had really crazy hair in that movie too.
Very crazy hair,
as I recall. Yeah.
It's an extremely weird movie. It was made independently in Australia, and it was at the time the biggest hit in Australian box office history. And so Warner Brothers, I think it was, picked it up thinking maybe it'll translate over here. And of course it didn't at all. It flopped.
I wonder if they were...
Yahoo Serious became kind of a punchline.
Yeah. Maybe they were banking on the whole Crocodile Dundee thing a little bit.
I'm sure they were. I'm sure they were looking for the next Crocodile Dundee. Low budget movie by an Australian comic. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. The thing I most remember is I just remember seeing a lot of commercials for this movie, and the fact that the guy's name was Yahoo Serious obviously stuck with me, and his hair. I just remember it being around and in the air, but I don't know that I've seen bits of it. Isn't that Great Southern Land song in this movie, which is kind of like the unofficial Australian national anthem?
National anthem.
Unofficially,
it's a great
obviously.
song.
It is a great song. I love that song. Yeah.
Did you have any other B movies?
I saw a title, and I don't think I've seen this one because I'm more of a blood sport person, but I saw Kickboxer on there, which, again, I'm sure you can speak to.
I'm more of a blood sport person.
I am. Well, we've talked about this.
I know. You're a blood
I've
sport
seen
fan.
blood sport a lot, and I don't. If I've seen Kickboxer, maybe I've seen it once. So.
I think I might have shown it to you.
Yeah,
once.
I don't know. I don't know it that well.
It's essentially a remake of Bloodsport. I mean, it's not. Yeah. It's very, very similar.
What a surprise.
His brother has been hurt by the villain, and so he trains and takes him on in a kickboxing tournament.
Is this the one where he dances?
Yes, it is.
In the bar? Okay, so that's important. That's a big deal.
It has an amazing dance scene where Jean-Claude gets down. He's
like drunk, or he's pretending to be drunk. I don't know. This is you can find this as a GIF. I'm pretty sure it's a very popular
He's wearing his pants like up to his neck almost.
Which is not unusual for him.
He's like belted, and he's got like a muscle shirt tucked into dress pants, which are like belted. It's so weird.
And his dance is it's like Elaine Bennis.
Very strange. Yeah, nobody dances like Jean-Claude dances in this movie, for sure.
Jean-Claude should always dance in his movies. I mean, let's remember Breakin'.
Yeah.
He's great.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. So I have a few.
Okay.
There were some really fun B movies from this period. One was Lock Up, which is another prison thriller. This one was Stallone, where Donald Sutherland plays the evil warden who has framed Stallone and got him in the clink.
A lot of these
and
movies.
And then threatens his wife, so Stallone has to escape from prison to go save his wife.
Oh.
Relentless, which is a serial killer thriller with Judd Nelson.
Okay.
Made by I think it's William Lustig is his name, but this guy's a great maker of genre, like gritty, trashy genre movies. He did Maniac Cop and Vigilante, which is a great Robert Forster, Fred Williamson thriller from the end of the 70s. It's just a very trashy, fun movie. Robert Loggia is the cop who's chasing him.
Wow.
Next of Kin, which is Patrick Swayze as a Chicago cop who was formerly a Appalachian kind of hillbilly.
How have I not seen this?
And he's moved to the city and he become a police officer. And then one of his brothers is murdered in the city. And then Liam Neeson, who plays the hillbilly brother who stayed behind in the mountains, comes to Chicago to look for the killer. And Swayze's like, no, let me handle this. I'm a cop now. I can do it. And then Neeson's like, no, this is country justice. We got to do it our way.
Neeson's got a special set of skills. Come on.
Yeah. And so it's the two of them hunting this killer through Chicago. And Helen Hunt plays his wife. And it's kooky.
Oh my gosh. I sort of feel like I need to see this.
Yeah.
This is wild.
As a Swayze completist, you probably do.
Yeah, I probably do.
Tango and Cash.
Oh yeah.
Which is a almost indescribably dumb action movie with Stallone and Kurt Russell.
Yeah, I've never seen this either.
As a couple of cops. Stallone is the straight-laced cop, and Kurt Russell is the wild man.
I always have to think
it's just very like by the numbers.
Okay.
Like total ego stroking, like these two guys prancing around like at the peak of their powers, and it's just
right. I always have to take a few beats to remember between Turner and Hooch and Tango and Cash, which is the one with the dog. I have to take a few seconds to remember.
Well, what actor would want to be known as Hooch?
Yeah, no, right? I mean, I usually get there pretty fast. It just takes me, when I hear Tango and Cash, I'm like, wait, is that the one with the dog? Yeah. But it isn't. So
I'm not sure. I mean, I've seen Tango and Cash like probably 5 times in my life. Yeah. And I don't remember which one's which, to be honest. I can't. Yeah. I feel like Stallone might be Tango, but I wouldn't want to wager on it.
I haven't seen it, to be fair.
And then finally, martial arts movie, Karate Kid-ish kind of ripoff called Best of the Best.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Which is Eric Roberts and James Earl Jones and Sally Kirkland.
Wow.
And what's interesting about it, it's about the World Championship karate tournament.
Of course, the best of the best.
And so James Earl Jones is the coach, and he puts together the American team. And Eric Roberts is kind of the bad boy on the team, and they face off against Korea in the World Championships. And one of the Korean fighters in a previous fight killed the brother of one of the American fighters.
This is always happening.
Yeah, but it's actually played for tears at the end, and it has this very shockingly moving scene that's very sweet and kind of lovely at the end of it. Yeah, it's really unexpected. And then finally, and then this is actually, I had this in So Bad It's Good, but it's also kind of a B movie, but it's a classic, right? Which is Weekend at Bernie's.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Such an 80s movie, too. We really need to talk about this. Yeah, we really need to talk about it.
I was saying last week how many of the movies of 89 didn't feel very 80s to me, that we were moving out of the 80s here. But Weekend at Bernie's is not one of those.
No.
Weekend at Bernie's has the 80s in its blood.
I mean, you often mention movies that you should just show to an alien or someone who doesn't understand what the 80s is, and they should get it. I feel like this is pretty close to one of those movies. Yeah. Well, let's explain to the people. Let's talk about Weekend at Bernie's.
What it is. You don't have to explain. Who doesn't know what Weekend at Bernie's is?
I mean, I don't know.
Probably, Gen Z. Like, probably young people.
There might be younger people who don't know Weekend at Bernie's. Sure.
But it's become such a thing, I mean, how many millions of comedies since Weekend at Bernie's have had scenes where somebody has had a corpse and has made it look alive, or has just or somebody who's asleep made them look like they're awake,
But this is an entire movie built around
shorthand
that.
For that. So it's like, I feel like I've seen movies where people are like, "Are you going to Weekend at Bernie's that guy?"
Have
or
you?
whatever?
Okay. But I mean, this is the entire movie is centered around it.
It's built on one joke, which is Jonathan Silverman and Andrew McCarthy are these Wall Street guys that go out to their boss's place in Martha's Vineyard, I think.
No, in the Hamptons.
Oh, the Hamptons,
on Long Island,
right.
yeah.
And he has died. Their boss has died. But instead of reporting it, they pretend he's alive.
Well, and he there's something with corruptness or the mob or something happening.
Yeah, the mob's
right?
the mob killed Bernie.
That's right.
But the two our two heroes don't realize that at first. They're keeping him alive because they want to party for the weekend, I think.
I forget why. There's some reason. But it probably doesn't even matter. But
I actually remember, but do you really care?
Just tell the people. Why not?
Well, I think they keep him alive because
it's something
Andrew
to do with
McCarthy
their careers,
is kind of a smarmy,
sure.
obnoxious guy. He just wants to party because there's women in bikinis walking around.
Yeah.
Silverman, who's like the straight-laced voice of reason, agrees to it because he's in love with Catherine Mary Stewart's character, and she's there.
Yes. And so they have to keep him alive.
Yeah. But then eventually they have to keep him alive because the mob...
Yeah, something
to do with how the mob's trying to kill them and somehow making it look like he's alive protects them in some way. I can't remember exactly.
Boy, hats off to the actor who had to pretend to be dead and get hauled around like that.
I know. Yeah. Can you imagine?
He does an amazing job.
Yeah. I think I read that he got hurt a lot.
You would have. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stunts in that movie. I mean, they drag his corpse behind a speedboat.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's probably not him, but
no, it's a stunt man. But even so, it's quite a stunt.
It is, yeah, it's crazy.
All right, do you want to do the Oscars in the box office?
Yeah, let's do it. So,
we didn't do rewindable moments.
Oh, do you want to do those first?
That. Yeah.
Okay.
So our scenes from individual scenes we loved
from these movies.
From some of these movies. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a few. I have one that from a movie we didn't talk about that is just. I didn't like the movie, but it's one of those scenes, kind of like in last week's episode when I was describing the condom, the glow in the dark condom fight in Skin Deep. It's just one of those scenes that once you see it, you've seen it.
You don't forget it. Yeah.
There were a few of those this year because there was also the Don Johnson puking on a guy in Dead
Oh my
Thing.
gosh, I had forgotten.
This is worse than both of those.
Oh my God.
Should I just say it?
Let's
now that I built it up.
Let's hear it.
It's from a horror film called Society.
Oh boy. Okay.
Which I only saw once, and I can't remember exactly what it's about, except that I think there's it's high society people, rich 80s people, like Dynasty level society, who are into some kind of body.
Oh God. No, keep going. It's fine.
Yeah, they're into it's something. And anyway, at the end of the movie, all the society people, 100 people, become one giant, oozing, dripping, modulating, pulsing wall of flesh.
Oh God,
with
this
faces
would so not be for me.
Arms and fingers and feet.
No,
but it just looks like one giant, disgusting, wet.
Oh my God.
Pulsing blob of flesh. And it's so
my stomach
gross.
Is
it's one of the grossest
right now.
special effects I've seen ever in a movie. And it's a thing that once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. My memory of the rest of the movie is that it's terrible. And probably not worth watching. But that scene, if you're the kind of person who likes to test the limits of what they can handle looking at, then you could. Here's one for you, folks.
I am not that person. That sounds like the worst thing that you could put me through. That is so horrible.
No, it's not for you.
Oh God, yeah.
But the movie has has kind of a notorious cult classic status, and I suspect it's entirely because of that scene.
I mean, this is the reason I can't watch those movies is you describe it and I can see it in my head and I'm already disgusted
you're not
and
one
horrified.
for Cronenberg. You're not a big body horror.
I mean,
person.
The Fly is awesome. It's not that I don't appreciate what some of these people are trying to do, but I can't watch it. It's already in my head and I haven't seen it, so can't do it.
The Fly, believe it or not, is pretty mild by Cronenberg standards.
I mean, that's why I can watch it, probably. Yeah. I even had a hard time with Black Swan to some degree. So, yeah.
What are your rewindable moments? Switching gears.
Yeah, I had from Henry V, the St. Crispin's Day speech. The famous,
God, yeah, it's great.
Wonderful.
And it's one long shot after the fight, after the battle.
Yeah.
It's like a 3-minute tracking shot. It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful. I would love to see that movie again. I think I saw it originally when I was a little too young to appreciate it, and still it's amazing. And I also I like the ending because Emma Thompson comes in as the French.
I love the beginning too, where it's dark and the match lights, and it's Derek Jacobi, and he narrates, and over a muse of fire, and he's walking around behind like a backstage, and then at the end he like throws open the doors, and all of a sudden you're in the countryside, and it's so good.
I need to see this movie again. Oh, Kenneth Branagh, y'all. He's wonderful.
Yeah.
I had Uncle Buck with the pancake because that's the thing.
The giant pancake.
Yeah, giant. I mean, there's you may have some others from Uncle Buck that are. I
actually didn't, but yeah, I mean, it's a great movie. The scene where he's hitting golf balls at the boyfriend, the Jay Underwood character.
Yeah, he's definitely not a fan of the boyfriend in that movie. Yep. Well, I mean, there's probably a lot from Christmas Vacation. All the problems Clark has with the house lights always crack me up.
Yep.
The cat in the tree.
Yeah. Getting stuck in the attic, watching the home movies, the scene where he goes shopping and the woman has
I don't remember.
It's like a woman with like a large chest, and he's drooling all over her, and he keeps fudging his words. And,
I see.
Yeah.
I'm also, the other thing that has always cracked me up from like a kid to today is the sledding scene where he puts the special.
Yeah, that was my pick.
Oh, okay, that's your
movie.
pick.
Yeah, that's my favorite scene in the movie, where he greases up that sled, and then he's like passing cars on the interstate.
Yeah, it's still funny to me. I think that's really funny. Yeah. And then there's Spatula City from UHF that we already tried. So many things.
Yeah, I was trying to pick a UHF scene, that's rough. Spatula City's up there.
Yeah.
I love the Rambo spoof. I love the Beverly Hillbillies scene set to Money for Nothing by Dire Straits.
Dire Straits, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really good. I should throw to you do you have any for War of the Roses? Because I thought there were probably some good ones from that, but I have to throw to you because I don't remember that movie super well.
I mean, there's a dinner party scene where Douglas comes in drunk and he pees on the food while it's on the stove. Uh-huh. And then he goes out in his car, and she's got this big like Bigfoot truck. Do you remember Bigfoot? Speaking of the 80s.
Yeah, sure.
She's got this Bigfoot truck, and he's got this little tiny sports car, and she drives over the top of him and crushes him in the car. And,
oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's full of stuff like that. There's an amazing scene where she thinks he's poisoned her wine, and he thinks she's poisoned the pate.
Right.
And they're eating it, and they're looking at each other like, are you killing me? I don't know. Are you killing me?
Yeah.
It's full of great scenes. And the whole chandelier bit at the ending is amazing.
Yeah. What else do you have? I mean, I think that was
You mentioned most of mine. The only one I had that you didn't mention was I love the birthday party scene from Parenthood.
I don't remember. For the big story I told about it, I don't remember that at all. I remember so little.
Well, Steve Martin, he has this little boy who's like 12 who's hypersensitive, cries really easy.
Okay.
And they have this big birthday party for him, and there's supposed to be a cowboy. They've hired like a cowboy to show up. Like they have the horse there and everything. They're waiting for the cowboy.
Oh, okay.
And for some reason, the cowboy cancels.
Okay.
And the kid starts to have a panic attack, and Steve Martin, to save the day, puts on he like ties a couple of bath mats around his legs to make he like puts on a really ridiculous cowboy outfit, and then comes out and plays with the kids, and he does a whole like classic Steve Martin routine. It's very funny.
I was going to say that's so Steve Martin. I do remember this now that you describe it.
It's just a great sequence. It's very funny and also just very kind of sweet. And
it's very classic Steve Martin in that way. Very cool. Love it.
All right, Oscars and box office.
Okay, what do you want first?
Give us the Oscars. Well, I think I named most of them.
You did. Well, let's see if you did. We always test you at the end to see if you got it right.
I'm pretty sure I got these.
I think you probably did too.
So actress is Jessica Tandy.
That's correct, for Driving Miss Daisy.
Supporting actor was Denzel.
For Glory. Mm-hmm.
Best picture was Driving Miss Daisy.
That's correct. Who was best actor?
Daniel Day-Lewis.
For My Left Foot. And did you already say...
Director is where I'm running into trouble, because Driving Miss Daisy won picture, but I remember it being a big deal that it wasn't nominated for Best Director. So what did win Best Director? Is it Oliver Stone?
It was for Born on the 4th of July. Did you say supporting actress yet? I don't think you did. You've mentioned her in this episode.
Did I?
Yep. Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, I'm blanking.
It's Brenda Fricker.
Oh, Brenda Fricker.
For My Left
she's great.
Yep.
Yeah, My Left
So
Foot.
yeah, mostly My Left Foot, A Little Driving Miss Daisy, Denzel for Glory, and Oliver Stone for Born on the 4th of July as director. And the song, do you want to guess what the song was? You'll be like, you'll kick yourself once you hear. I think.
What's the movie?
It's The Little Mermaid. Which gives it away.
I don't know which one.
It was Under the Sea. It was Under the Sea. And I do kind of remember the big production number for this at the time.
Who doesn't?
Yeah,
Speaking of seeing something and never being able, isn't it Nell Carter? No, it's the guy from...
you're thinking... It's the guy from Annie.
It's the guy from Annie, Jeffrey Holder.
Jeffrey Holder.
Yeah.
No, you're thinking of, she did Aladdin, I think.
Oh, God, that's right, yeah.
That was a few years later.
Nell Carter did Aladdin at the Oscars.
Our national treasure.
Man, the Oscars were weird.
Yeah.
We should do an Oscars episode. We could spend a whole episode just talking about
literally
Rob
the
Lowe
shows.
And Snow White.
Yeah. And all of Billy Crystal's songs. Anyway, it was Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid.
All right. Yeah, I mean, that started a tradition, right, of every... It seems like every time there was a Disney animated movie,
at least for a while,
kind of a lock for best song.
That's true. Now it's kind of Pixar's taken that over a little, to some degree, not quite as much.
Although Pixar is Disney.
That's true. Good point. Highest grossing films, we'll go from 10 to 1.
Yeah.
10 was Born on the 4th of July. 9 was Ghostbusters 2. 8 was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. 7 was Lethal Weapon 2. We're into that sequelitis here. 6 was The Little Mermaid. 5 was Dead Poets Society. 4 was Look Who's Talking. 3 was Back to the Future Part 2. 2 was Batman, which I was surprised wasn't number 1. But number 1 was Indiana Jones on the Last Crusade, which we barely talked about at all. And I don't know if we want to talk about it now. But that was number 1.
It's great.
It is, yeah.
My mixed feelings about it have always been that Spielberg was really hard on Temple of Doom, which was the second movie, which he said that he was embarrassed to have made, and that he made Last Crusade as an apology to the world for having made Temple of Doom. And frankly, I don't think there's anything to apologize about for Temple of Doom, because I love Temple of Doom.
I think a lot of people do, don't they?
I think it's the second best Indiana Jones movie. I mean, nothing comes anywhere near the
Raiders. First time you see anything,
But I'll take Temple of Doom over Last Crusade any day, and I know that's probably a somewhat unpopular opinion. I think most people like the third one second best, but... And I like the third one. I like Connery.
Yeah, I think that's really he and Connery are really fun. The
finale is great. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen it in a really long time.
It probably should have just been the last movie, because the Indiana Jones 4 and 5, neither of one was very good. And Indiana Jones 3, where they literally ride into the sunset in the last shot of the movie, is a great ending.
Right. Classic.
It's not like we had unanswered questions about Indiana Jones. So,
well, yeah, I don't, it's been a long time since I saw it. I remember thinking the stuff between Sean Connery and Harrison
I'm also
Ford
surprised
was really
that
good,
outgrossed Batman.
I am too.
Batman seemed way bigger. Batman just seemed like the cultural event of the year that year.
I was pretty sure when I opened it that I was going to see Batman at number 1. I mean, it was 2. So, and they were both in we're talking 400 million for, they were both in that realm range, but, yeah.
All right, let's do our own top 10 of 89.
All right, you want to go first?
Ladies first.
Okay. Do we do 10 to 1 for this? I guess we do. All right. I've got 10. And let me remind people, for me, this is all about stuff I would rewatch again. These are not what I think are the best movies of all time necessarily. Sometimes I do, but 10, The Mighty Quinn. 9, UHF. 8, Uncle Buck. 7, Christmas Vacation. 6, Batman. 5, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. 4, Dead Calm. 3, Say Anything. 2, Miracle Mile. And 1, Heathers.
Wow. So except for 7 of your 10 were comedies.
I know, which is
this is a big
not
year
that I don't love a comedy,
there.
but I was surprised to see how many were comedies for me.
Yeah. It was a big comedy year.
Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah. Should I do my honorable mentions at this point? I'm looking at
mine, and only 2 were comedies.
Well, I mean, I
so
feel
we
like
had pretty different top 10s this year.
The ones I put, I feel, are pretty rewatchable.
For sure. Anyway. I loved every movie you just mentioned.
But some of my honorable mentions are Do the Right Thing, which is amazing. Henry V, also amazing. I also like The Abyss and Leviathan, Black Rain, which I've mentioned I love, Steel Magnolias, and that's what I got.
Okay, here's mine. Number 10, Henry V. Number 9, Roger and Me. Number 8, An Innocent Man. Number 7, Christmas Vacation. Number 6, Batman.
We had 7 and 6 exactly the same.
Number 5, When Harry Met Sally. Number 4, Field of Dreams. Number 3, Dead Calm. Number 2, Dead Poets Society. And number 1, Miracle Mile. Here's my honorable mention. Indiana Jones, Heathers, Bill and Ted, Say Anything, Mighty Quinn, Lean on Me. The trilogy of underwater alien movies.
Yep.
Parenthood, War of the Roses, Driving Miss Daisy, UHF, The Package, Black Rain, and Do the Right Thing.
I think part of the problem for me, there's a lot of movies you mentioned in your top 10 that probably should be in my top 10, but I just haven't seen them enough, and I don't remember them well enough, and I think if I saw them again now, I would probably put them in the top 10. Like Henry V, I just haven't seen that in a really long time. That should probably be in the top 10, but there it is, so...
Yeah, it's great. All right, anything else? We've done it.
We have done it. So what do we want to say to the people that
we made it to the end of the decade? Yeah. Well, the podcast won't end.
No.
We'll keep talking about 80s movies. We just won't be doing it in this
like year by year
formula of looking at 6-month increments of the decade because we've done that.
So what are some things that we want to talk about?
I think this is I think we've, I don't know that we've created a canon of any kind of anything, but I think it was an interesting experience to literally go month by month through the entire decade. And it's always been by far my favorite era for movies. And it's funny because I think a lot of critics and a lot of people, like Tarantino famously said that he said the 80s were the single worst decade for cinema. And so I'm sure some of it is nostalgia and some of it is like, this is the decade that I fell in love with movies, which is something I've kind of dedicated my life to. And, and so a lot of it is that, but a lot of it, I think looking back, I would just say these are objectively great movies. Like the best movies of the 80s, I would put up against any decade.
Absolutely.
And I think it's not just because the 80s became the era of the blockbuster and the era that introduced the sequel doesn't mean that it also wasn't just a great era for original films.
I think we've shown that through some of the sort of hidden gems that we've talked about. And even the not so hidden gems, there's definitely some stuff in there that's very original. And I mean, it's maybe as influential a decade for film as almost any, except for like the really early years where, it all kind of came from.
The other thing I want to say too is like, and we've talked about this occasionally just in discussing the 80s as a decade, that the 80s was a very optimistic decade.
Yeah.
The economy was generally really good. Reagan was president, and, I hate Ronald Reagan, but he was a very popular president who had a very kind of like optimistic...
Morning in America.
Yeah, Morning in America. Optimistic kind of view of society and the country. And it was just, there was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. It was a fun decade. And, as you know, I watch a lot of like 80s stuff on YouTube. And I'm always struck by the comment section on those videos. It's two things. It's always just two things. It's either people who were young in the 80s saying, oh man, I wish I could go back.
Yeah.
You guys don't know what you missed. It was just the greatest decade. It was so much fun. We didn't have phones. We actually went to the mall in person. We talked to each other. It was a great time to be a kid and great time to be a teenager. And the other comment you see on those videos is from like Gen Zers and or millennials saying, man, this looked like so much fun. Like we really missed out. Like I really wish this had been my decade. Like I wish I could experience this. And sometimes it's just these weirdly like almost anthropological objective observations of what they're seeing in the videos. Like the comments will say things like, look at them, nobody has a phone.
Right. People are talking to each other.
Look at these people engaging with each other.
Right.
As though that's some kind of alien event. And it's not like the 80s had a monopoly on that kind of interaction.
Of course
but it did feel like, you know, the internet did show up in the 90s, and cell phones showed up in the 90s. And it did feel like the last whole decade where those kinds of things were the daily truth. And and there is something like we have lost something there. So
yeah, I think some of us definitely feel that way. And if it's, again, nostalgia, and rose-colored glasses. I mean, of course, there were awful things in the 80s, too, and it wasn't always easy to be a teenager in the 80s.
For sure.
You know, I mean, some of the movies show that with, you know, bullies and cliques and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, also as a whole, overall, you know, there was a lot of fun, a lot of optimism, and it's hard not to be nostalgic for it because it was pretty great.
And the way I think you see that in the movies is that these movies were not very arch or sarcastic.
No, that didn't come until the 90s,
They were
really.
very sincere.
Yeah.
And
for the most
certainly
part,
the 90s, like that changed everything. I mean, we immediately started getting like reality bites and stuff like that, which were very, and it was our generation, the generation that were kids in the 80s, Generation
Gen
X,
X-ers.
who ushered in an era of like skepticism and cynicism and sarcasm,
grunge, etc.
All that stuff. So, and that stuff didn't come out of nowhere.
No.
So that stuff was in part a reaction to the 80s. And grunge music is a good example, was a reaction to the surface commercialism, lack of substance in a lot of 80s culture.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
But along with all that stuff, which is negative, you know, being surface and being commercial and having a lack of substance, there was just a lot of sincerity in it. And these movies were not like they were... So I think it feels, it's not just nostalgia. Like it feels good to watch a lot of these movies. Like
of course,
it's just,
you know. Well, people keep watching them over and over. Some of these are classics to a lot of people across generations, I think. I mean, Stranger Things as a show on Netflix was huge for a reason, right? And
and Gen Z, and like they love a lot of 80s culture and 80s movies.
It's how it seems,
right?
For sure.
I mean, Kate Bush, after Stranger Things, that Running Up the Hill went back to number one.
It did.
I mean, this kind of, and that's not an anomaly. Things like this just happen every once in a while. And it seems there's a lot of 80s influenced synthwave artists that are making music now. And it's not that there isn't nostalgia around the 90s, but it seems
a lot of it.
Yeah, but it seems to me that the nostalgia around the 90s is less about the 90s as a decade in its entirety and more about individual artifacts from the 80s, like Friends.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And some of the clothes and the hair and the outfits.
But it's not like we're dreaming of going back to the 90s. I don't see
Usually not.
I don't see a lot of that in the way that the 80s as a thing, just by itself, has become...
Yeah, I would think if people are wishing to go back to the 90s, like younger people are wishing to go back to the 90s, it's for the same reasons. It's sort of lumped in with the 80s in that respect, you know, the pre-phone, pre-internet, kind of that sort of thing, I would imagine. Because I don't think it's distinct from it in that particular way. Yeah.
But the 90s is definitely like it's not a fun decade to revisit in the way that the 80s is.
For some, I think that's true. Yeah, some people have a real love for
because because the 80s it's color and
and it's neon and it's hairspray
and it's new wave music and it's drugs and cocaine and parties and and Miami and like it's
the
just
music
and music it's just it's
not angsty.
It's a glossy fun party of a decade.
It's not remembered for angst, although that
and the
was
90s
a thing,
is all about flannel and browns and and greens and sarcasm and it's I don't know, the 90s was not a party decade.
No, I mean there were great things like indie films. I mean
that
was great, but it's very different.
I'm just trying to say
the tenor
revisiting
of
the 80s is a
It's a lot of fun.
I think for me and for a lot of people is an experience of pleasure that you don't get in revisiting the 90s
a party.
Or the 70s.
It's a party. I think you think of parties when you think of the 80s. You don't think of that with the 90s, or most people don't quite as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. We'll continue to talk 80s movies, maybe not as
not in the same
maybe
format.
Not in the same form and not as perhaps regularly as we have been. But if you've followed us all the way through all of these episodes in which we've picked the 80s apart 6 months by 6 months, then we appreciate you going on that journey with us, and we hope you have hope you've rediscovered some films that maybe you'd forgotten about, and hopefully we've pointed you towards some 80s lost classics that you maybe haven't heard of, and if nothing else, given you an appreciation of the decade that perhaps wasn't there before you started listening to this. So
we hope you'll stick with us, and
thank you for going on this journey with us.
Thank you, and we hope to see you again soon.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Long Rewind. The program is produced by Dustin Morrow and hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli. If you enjoy the show, please consider hitting the subscribe button, leave us a good review on your podcast app, and tell your friends about the program. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.